By the late 12th century, the landscape of the Holy Land was a patchwork of ambition, faith, and fragile peace. For nearly 100 years, the Crusader states, kingdoms established by Western Europeans after the First Crusade, had clung to the sacred cities and trade routes of the Levant. Their castles dotted the hills, their knights patrolled the roads, and their courts echoed with prayers and intrigue. Yet by 1187 a storm was gathering on the horizon, one that would sweep away the certainties of the past and reshape the destiny of the region. At the heart of this gathering storm stood Saladin, Sultan of Egypt and Syria. Far more than a conqueror, Saladin was a master of patience and calculation. He had spent years uniting the fractious Muslim realms, forging alliances, and studying the Crusader states that stood between his domains. He knew their strengths, their formidable knights, their stone fortresses, their religious zeal. But he also knew their weaknesses, the divisions among their leaders, the overextension of their territories, and above all, their dependence on water in a land ruled by the sun. Within the Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem, these weaknesses were becoming ever more pronounced. In 1186, the throne passed to Guy of Lusignan, a man whose claim was contested, whose authority was fragile. Many of the kingdom's most powerful nobles, including the experienced Raymond III of Tripoli, resented Guy's rise. They had expected to guide the kingdom's fate, not be sidelined by an outsider. The court of Jerusalem split into two bitter factions. On one side stood the Hawks, Gerard de Riedfort, Grand Master of the Knights Templar, and Reynaud of Chatillon, Lord of the fortress at Carac. They favored confrontation, believing that only strength and aggression could hold back the Muslim tide. On the other side were the moderates, led by Raymond, who understood the limits of Crusader power and sought to preserve peace through diplomacy, even if it meant uneasy truces with Saladin. The fragile peace was shattered in the spring of 1187. Reynaud, notorious for his recklessness and disdain for treaties, attacked a Muslim caravan traveling from Egypt to Syria. Among the prisoners was reportedly Saladin's own sister. When Saladin demanded the release of the captives and the return of his property, Reynaud refused, mocking the Sultan's demands. Outraged, Saladin swore a blood oath. He would see Reynaud dead by his own hand. The stage was set for a confrontation that would decide the fate of the Holy Land. Saladin was determined not just to punish Reynaud, but to break the Crusader states once and for all. He knew that brute force alone would not suffice. The Crusaders' castles were too strong, their knights too formidable in open battle. Instead, he sought to lure them into a trap, to exploit their divisions and their dependence on water. Saladin's opportunity came in late June 1187. He marched his army north and laid siege to the city of Tiberias, perched on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. Tiberias belonged to Raymond of Tripoli, and inside its walls was Raymond's wife, Ashiva. The attack was a calculated provocation, a test of the Crusaders' resolve and unity. At the fortress of Sephoria, King Guy assembled the full strength of the kingdom. 20,000 men gathered, including 1,200 armored knights, the flower of Western chivalry. With them they carried their most sacred relic, the true cross, believed to be the very wood upon which Jesus had been crucified. The presence of the true cross was meant to inspire courage, to remind the army that God was on their side. But courage alone would not suffice. The Crusader leaders met in council to decide their response. Raymond, whose city and wife were under siege, made a shocking proposal. He urged caution, warning that Saladin wanted to draw them away from their water sources and into the arid hills, where his army could strike at their weakest. Better to lose one city than the entire kingdom, he argued. Yet his enemies were quick to accuse him of cowardice, even treachery. Gerard de Riedfort, the Templar Grand Master, thundered that abandoning Tiberias would be a betrayal of their Christian brothers and sisters. King Guy wavered. At first, he accepted Raymond's advice, but overnight, Gerard and the Hawks convinced him to act. The next morning, the Crusader host set out from Sephoria, marching east toward Tiberias and into the heart of Saladin's trap. The journey was only 17 miles, but the path ran through a barren, sun-baked landscape. Saladin's mounted archers shadowed the Crusader column, loosing arrows and harassing their flanks. The Crusaders were forced to march in tight formation, slowing their advance and exhausting their men and horses. Worse still, Saladin had anticipated their every move. His forces had filled or guarded every spring along the route, denying the Crusaders the water they so desperately needed. As the sun climbed higher, the heat became unbearable. Saladin's men set fire to the dry brush, filling the air with smoke and choking the Crusaders in their heavy armor. By midday, men and horses were collapsing from thirst. The shimmering waters of the Sea of Galilee remained agonizingly out of reach. By nightfall, the army had made it only halfway, camping near the twin hills known as the Horns of Hattin. During the night, Saladin's forces completed their encirclement, surrounding the exhausted Crusaders and harassing their camp to prevent any rest. Dawn broke on July 4th over an army on the brink of collapse. The Crusaders' water was gone, their strength sapped by the relentless heat and the constant attacks. King Guy ordered a desperate push toward the lake, hoping to break through Saladin's lines and reach salvation. The bishops raised the true cross on a hill to rally the troops. But even this sacred symbol could not restore the strength of men who had not tasted water in over a day. Discipline began to break down. The infantry, maddened by thirst, broke ranks and rushed toward the distant lake, only to be cut down by Saladin's cavalry. The knights, left exposed, fought bravely, but were gradually overwhelmed by waves of arrows and mounted assaults. Saladin had waited for this moment, and now he pressed his advantage, focusing his attack on the hill where King Guy and the True Cross stood. In the chaos, Raymond of Tripoli saw that all was lost. He gathered the remnants of his men and charged the Muslim lines. To his astonishment, Saladin's troops parted, allowing him to escape, perhaps a sign of respect for his earlier caution, or perhaps a calculated move to sow further discord among the Crusaders. The rest of the army was not so fortunate. The True Cross was captured, a devastating spiritual blow to the Crusaders. By afternoon, resistance collapsed. King Guy, Reynold of Chatillon, Gerard de Riedefort, and hundreds of knights were taken prisoner. In the aftermath of the battle, Saladin summoned the captured leaders to his tent. He offered water to King Guy, who drank and then passed the cup to Reynold. Saladin intervened, declaring that Reynold, who had broken truces and spilled innocent blood, would not drink from his hand. True to his oath, Saladin executed Reynold personally, while sparing King Guy, saying, "A king does not kill kings, but that man's treachery went too far." For the other captives, mercy was in short supply. Saladin ordered the execution of all captured Templar and Hospitaller knights, whom he considered his most dangerous foes. The rest were held for ransom. With the Crusader military destroyed in a single day, Saladin moved swiftly. City after city fell. Acre, Sidon, Beirut, Nazareth, Jaffa. Each surrendered or was captured with little resistance. By October, Saladin's army stood before the walls of Jerusalem itself. The city, bereft of defenders, surrendered after a brief siege. Saladin refused to allow a massacre. Instead, he permitted the Christian inhabitants to leave after paying a ransom, showing a clemency that stood in stark contrast to the bloodshed that had accompanied the Crusaders' own conquest of Jerusalem nearly 90 years before. The Battle of Hattin marked the end of an era. The Crusader presence was reduced to a handful of coastal cities. Though the Third Crusade would bring new armies and temporary gains, the dream of a Christian Jerusalem would never be fully restored. Saladin's victory at Hattin remains a testament to the power of strategy, patience, and psychological insight. He understood his enemy's weaknesses, used the terrain as a weapon, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. In a single campaign, he accomplished what decades of warfare had failed to achieve, the reunification of the Holy Land under Muslim rule. Above all, the story of Hattin is a lesson in leadership. Bravery and faith are vital, but they are not enough. True victory belongs to those who see beyond the immediate battlefield, who understand the hearts and minds of their foes, and who have the patience to wait for the decisive moment. On the scorched hills of Galilee, Saladin changed the course of history, not through brute force, but through the art of war at its highest form. If you enjoyed this historical journey, please support our channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Don't miss our upcoming content.